First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Yolngu people for having this. This is my first time to Garma, and it's great to be here, and I've heard so much about over the years, and it's a privilege to be here, to be honest. It's an absolute privilege. Paul asked me to do a bit of an overview of what the speakers have said, because when you hear a lot, sometimes you forget what the first speaker said through the last one. So that's why, if anybody noticed, I was busily writing notes to try and capture it. But certainly from Paul to start with, the East Arnhem company is looking at the post-mining economy. It's looking forward to the future, and that aligns to the theme of this Garma Festival, looking ahead. We've got to look to economic growth over the next 10 years. Joe, with the great work of the NLSC, it's their 50th anniversary, but importantly, they're not looking backwards, they're looking forwards. Where do they go from here? Their role is supporting, and I wasn't aware of this population figure in great detail, but they work with communities, or the area they cover, 51,000 people in their population that they cover, from Darwin, Katherine, remote communities. That's a lot of people to work with and to help achieve what they want to achieve. Interestingly, it was 55% of the landmass in the Northern Territory. That was really good that you mentioned that, because it reminded me that in the ILSC we have a figure that says 57% of Australia's landmass is in Aboriginal hands, and that's going to grow over the years ahead. But he also mentioned sea and water rights, and particularly for my own people, I'm a Yorta man, we're in Northern Victoria, freshwater rights. That has not been discussed enough, that has not been talked about enough. So together with sea rights, there is freshwater rights as well. I really did, the other thing to recall, I got asked about what was the land tenure arrangements in the Northern Territory this morning, and I wasn't sure. But you reminded me, Paul, that the Land Rights Act gives veto rights. That is incredibly powerful. The right to not only say yes, but the right to say no, I think what you said, that's incredible. That's something which I think reminds me that is about what you don't do as much as what you do. Rowan and Marcia, of course, with the Aboriginal Carbon Foundation, not only looking at the problem we have now and the problem we will have in the future, the climate, it's not going anywhere. It's only going to get worse. Whatever we can do to help abate that, manage it, and learn to live with it. Number 14 in the top 100 companies, that is not small beer, that is big beer. That's like a barrel of beer kind of stuff, you know? That's huge. How many people... barrel of water, knowledge water, of course. But how many people know that? The blackfellas are running companies that are in the top 100. No, not the top 100, the top 20. How many people know that? How many people conceive that? Very few. And importantly, separate from government. And it derives its own independent source of income. That's something, again, which a lot of people struggle with, is we have our own sources of income, and we can choose what we do with that. We can choose how we distribute it, how we apply it. The knowledge water story is a great one. A family from their own homeland using their own knowledge to build a product. And they use what they get from that, not for themselves, but for the benefit of their community. I think there's a bigger economic lesson in that for us all. I'm going to come to that in a minute. But seeing how that works, how a homeland family has made that into something is a really good thing to do. And I'd love to see homeland water in the shelves of markets in Victoria, because certainly I'd know I'd buy it. The East Arnhem Land, Damien, with the East Arnhem Land Corporation, 26 traditional owner groups, 26 shareholders who all think that they know better than the other 25, I imagine. That would, as somebody who sits on boards, that would be difficult. So Damien, if you're making that all work together, that's fantastic, mate, that's good stuff. But again, looking at the future, mining is finishing. We cannot wait for it to finish and then say, what do we do next? We have to say, we know it's coming, what do we do now so that we are on top of what comes next? Need to look at where we're going. The rehabilitation stuff, that's going to go on for a long time, targeting that as beyond being part of mining now, what happens after it's going. The use of local knowledge, and this was something you said, Damien, the use of local knowledge and local content works best. I mean, that's so simple, and yet again and again, it's either discounted or somebody has to have a revelation about it. It takes a while to embed itself. But, you know, ask the punters who it's about. Ask the punters who it's about, ask them what they think, and they'll tend to, you know, 99% of the time, they'll be on the right track. Which takes me to the bit I want to talk about, which is not the ILSC. There's actually a bigger thing I want to talk about. There's a larger issue I want to talk about. Many of the discussions here for the past 2 days, 3 days, they've been great. They have been fantastic. It is great to see people here who want to be here. None of you are here under coercion. None of you are here because you're made to be. You're here because you want to be. And wanting to be here is important. But a lot of the discussion, and even from the Prime Minister yesterday, have been about Aboriginal people walking in two worlds, have been about us learning to adjust to the wider environment. Why not? We've been doing it for 65,000 years. We adjust to the environment we find ourselves in, and we're doing it again. And we will continue to do it. That's what we do. That is who we are. But one of the things that I've not heard from the conversation, I've heard non-Aboriginal people wanting to learn from us, wanting to understand us. But one thing I haven't heard is non-Aboriginal people wanting to be like us, wanting to change to be as us. Not just helping us walk in their world, not even us just helping them walk in our world, but to actually change their fundamental DNA to be like us. So how does that work in the economy? If I juxtapose that to the economy, how does that work? The Western economic model is built on self-enrichment, self-improvement, but the individual. And in the current paradigm of what's been governing economic policy or economic thought for the past 40 years has been, in a corporate sense, profit maximisation, value to shareholders, and that's it, and nothing else. However, if you look at the Aboriginal model of the economy, what is the economy for? What is its purpose? It is to enrich everyone. It is to grow our communities. It is to bring everyone along. Not a few, not some, but all. That's how we do our economics. That's why we do what we do. That's how we think. Every one of these organisations you've heard talk this morning haven't spoken about it from the aspect of it is about just us as the owners or just us as the shareholders. It's about how this approach to the economy should be about enriching everyone. And it should be about the economy or our economic activity in the context of those other things that are important. How we live our lives. Our social, our cultural, our environmental and our economic well-being all living together. Not one or the other. I tire of this thing where people say we have to focus on the economy at the cost of everything else. No. All that means is you might have a really great economy, but if your planet's burning or drowning, depending on where you are, or in the health sense, everyone's got COVID and people are sick or dying, does it really matter what your GDP figures look like? No. One of the things I really like to see people take away from this, and particularly those of you who are in the corporate camps, and there's a lot. I didn't realise there were so many people here from corporations. Jeez, a lot of money sloshing around in this country at the moment. But it's great that you're here. One of the things that I don't think happens enough is Aboriginal people not only making decisions for ourselves, but making decisions for others, for non-Aboriginal people, making decisions that will affect them, that will bring our worldview to the decision-making that happens not only in government, but in this case in the economy, in the private sector, where 99% of the economy exists. I asked a question at the Institute of Company Directors who I'm here with today. They paid for me to come up here because they're about to take a huge journey and they're throwing themselves in boots and all. But I asked this question with 500 people in the room. How many blackfellas in the room? One arm went up, and it was mine. The question, or what I really want to see, is Aboriginal people in decision-making positions that it's not about us, but it's about everybody. to bring those values that we hold hard, that are part of us, that are very fibre of who we are, bring those into the decision-making parts of the economy and use those to drive the Australian economy, to use those as the values of what we are trying to achieve by having economic outcome, so that we all uplift, so we all benefit, so we all enrich. Having Aboriginal people in the boardroom, not just for diversity reasons. And why should we have Aboriginal people in the boardroom? For diversity? God, no. Diversity can be something you tick and flick and say, oh, look, we've got one of these, one of these, one of these, we're diverse. That's not an argument for diversity. The argument you have is, what do people bring? The Banking Royal Commission and the Aged Care Royal Commission quite clearly said that corporate Australia, through the banks and the aged care, but it was relevant to everyone else, the corporate sector had forgot a primary obligation. That is, what is your contribution to the society in which you live? Not just social licence, not just their social outcomes framework, but fundamentally in everything you do, what do you do to contribute to the society in which you live? It is a soft skill, but a specialist skill that, quite frankly, in my view, I think is lacking in the private economy of Australia. That's the place for Aboriginal people, because who understands community, who understands obligation, who understands all above self? Us. That doesn't mean that's the only thing we can do. You've got to be a walking, talking, senior executive or board director or whatever it is, but there should be Aboriginal people at the highest places in the economy in Australia. And I note the Reserve Bank, pity's not here now, but the Reserve Bank is being reviewed, is going to be under review at the moment. I think they need to look way beyond just monetary policy specialists. They need to have a broader range of people. If anybody can feed that back to the PM, blame me. But that's the sort of thing that we need to do. So this economic activity is lifting us here in East Arnhem Land, across the Northern Territory, in Victoria, on Yorta Yorta country, on Noongar country, on Wiradjuri country, on Aranda country. We have this rising economy. But we should also say, what is our place in the wider economy to help lead it? Not just be part of it, not just follow it, but lead it. And we need it because of the big challenges coming ahead, because the CSIRO put out a report last week that said, over the next 50 years, we're going to have hell rain down on us. But they didn't actually say that, that's my interpretation, but we're going to have climate issues, we're going to have health issues, the rise of artificial intelligence, digital and data economies, resource pressure and biodiversity. These guys are living that and trying to deal with it. Geopolitical shifts, our own political shifts in our own country, and diversity, equity and transparency. How do our institutions function? Why not bring the Aboriginal perspective to all those, rather than just assume that blackfellas are just going to be doing blackfella stuff? We are people of great capacity and capability. All we lack is the opportunity. That's all we should ask for, is the opportunity. I shall now get off my pulpit. However, there is one thing I do want to say in relation to Archie Roach. One of the other things I do is with I'm one of the stolen children, and I do stuff in that. I got asked, what did Archie mean to me? He gave the words we the stolen children could not speak. He turned into song so our voices could be heard. Rest in peace, Archie.